Today on You're a Better Artist Than You Think, writing comics for kids with Shawn Pryor, author of over 60 published books and graphic novels. Shawn Pryor, what was the moment where you, in looking back on it, feel like that was the moment you became a professional writer?
It was around 2019 and I was at home and I was just really upset with myself because my comic book career didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. And I was also at that time in a little bit of financial despair. Now out of the blue, I get an email from an editor at Capstone Publishing. They publish kids' books, whether it be chapter books, storybooks, mini graphic novels, all types of things, right? And so they said, well, we saw your name and we saw that you've written graphic novels and comics. Would you be interested in writing novellas for us? I wrote a baseball book for them called Diamond Double Play. That one payment for that single Capstone book was more money than I had made the 13 years I was in the comic book business.
Oh my.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, so this is what actual money looks like. In 2020, I landed a literary agent. And this is when it started to feel real to me. COVID year, I wrote 13 books for Capstone.
Wow.
I don't know how I did that.
Yeah, I don't either.
So whether it be a sports novella, a graphic novel, historical graphic novel, books for Sports Illustrated for kids, and things like that, this is when it really started to become real. Okay, this is when I felt like, okay, I am a writer.
You've worked on so many different kinds of projects, and you've already mentioned a couple of those. Can you give us just a few of the other highlights from your career? Because you have worked on so many different things. And if you could highlight a couple of comics things, because you have still done a lot of comics work.
A couple years ago, I did a story for Hasbro's Go-Go Power Rangers. I've also written graphic novels for Capstone, such as The Deadliest Race. It's kind of like a Twilight Zone for kids, or Goosebumps. Graphic novel series called Cash and Carry. I've also done books like Kaiju Unleashed, about the history of Godzilla on film, the things that inspired Godzilla, the people behind Godzilla. And this is where I could really let my nerd come out. I have what they call high-low reader series, where you have short sentences, highlighted text, and spot illustrations and special effects comic book text. I call them comic book adjacent books, but it's a superhero series called The Gamer. And The Gamer is about a kid by the name of Tyler, has a special wrist device that turns him into a superhero called The Gamer. Battles villains created by Cynthia Cyber. I've written lots of things, especially over the last 6 years alone, but those are some of the highlights.
When it comes to resources that help people with story craft, there is a lot of advice out there about structuring a story, act breaks and midpoints and climaxes and these kind of things. Something that my students ask me all the time is, but how do I figure out what I want to say? How do I know what the story's about?
Okay, I can give a perfect example of that. Fast Break, the graphic novel that's coming out next year. The original pitch, the way it started, was you have a basketball prodigy by the name of Michaela. Her mom finally got the dream job she always wanted. So now they're moving across town right before basketball season starts. Michaela is not able to play on the girls' basketball team. But there's an opportunity to play in a new co-ed league. And so now it's a situation of, does Michaela join the co-ed team? She also, has to make new friends because she's at a new school. So you're dealing with change. Black kids have a tendency to have to take on more than their average counterparts. And a lot of that's just due to society as a whole. And so we carry that weight with us. All right. And sometimes we don't, especially kids, they don't ask for help. They're like, well, if my mom does this on her own, she handles that. And my dad does this on their own and they handle that. I should be able to handle any problem that comes my way. Sometimes you need help.
Right.
And so when the story was originally put together, that part wasn't in it. About kids understanding that it's okay to ask for help, but being able to really sit down and list what are the conflicts going to be? How do we address these conflicts? What are the results? Those were like three really big factors in the creation of that story. So yes, there is an outline. And even within that outline, I have like a sub outline breaking down what the conflicts are and what the resolutions will be, if that makes sense.
Yes, exactly. There's a few things there. So one is very nuts and bolts. If you want to figure out what your story's about, just list out the conflicts. There's some forensic work that you can do. And that's great because it is so literal, right? You just make a shopping list of conflicts. And so the hope is that those conflicts inspire ideas for character development. And then there you are, you're at the meaning of the story. So that's a great tip there. And another tip I'm hearing is that it doesn't have to come first. The meaning of the story does not have to be the beginning of the process.
So when you're first approaching, say, creating Michaela, did you have a basic idea of what kind of struggles she might face? Or did that all come with the conflicts that you later introduced into the outline?
It definitely all came through with the conflicts. Once I started to list the conflicts, like everything kind of fell into place. It also helped me improve on writing Michaela's parents. Her mom is moving into a system administrative job, which means she's going to be working a lot of late hours. She didn't used to do that before. Michaela's mom used to be at every single basketball game with her dad, even her little brother. Okay. So what happens when the mom's working all the time? Well, now she's not being able to go to the games, and that builds resentment. And then that also made Michaela be like, well, if she's so busy, I can't go to her with my problems. I just have to figure this out myself. And then Michaela makes more mistakes.
Yeah, that's so interesting because it's almost like through those conflicts, you got an idea of Michaela. And then through that, knowledge of thematic content with Michaela, you then were able to extrapolate that into the different characters and make your, moral of the story even stronger through their interactions with each other. That's amazing. I was wondering if you could walk us through those beginning stages of your comics project when you're outlining.
Okay, now it varies from comic or graphic novel or book, but let's do The Deadliest Race. The Deadliest Race, released by Capstone Scary Graphics line. I literally went outside and I looked around and I saw a bunch of kids on BMX bikes. I was like, that's it. And like I literally walked back in the house and I walked back in the house. I said, Deadly BMX Race in another dimension, fate of children's lives are at hand. They're like, okay, go for it. I said, well, what are the key things that we want to make sure we see in this story? The three things I'm trying to get out of the story are the conflict between the lead character, I believe, if I recall correctly, his name is Aaron, and his adversary, the race, and do they finish the race? Aaron wants to be a BMX racer more than anything in the world. He wants to be able to get those jumps right and do all those cool stunts. He's not very good at it. Aaron attempts a BMX jump. He fails. He busts his bike. And Aaron's like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he takes his bike to the bike shop. And at the bike shop, he meets the owner of the bike shop. And the owner's like, hey, I'll fix your bike for free. I'll sponsor you in this BMX race at the park. That's the deal. And I'll fix your bike for free. And so Aaron's like, yeah, sure, of course, great. And come to find out that race is the deadliest race. And the bike shop owner is actually a demon. The demon collects the souls of these kid BMX racers who fail the race. And once they hit a certain number, all these demons will be free to roam the earth. They have to survive this race. If they can survive this race, all the kids will be free and they'll be able to get back home. Now we have our beginning. We've got our middle. We're about to set up this like major third act with the race. So now I'm like, okay, so how are we going to do this race? I go back and I start watching old cartoons just to see where like the types of like action conflicts and dangers that they would get into. And then I also watch stuff like Double Dare. I've listed out like all the booby traps and all the magical dangers. I was like, okay, well, we got to give this villain, this bike shop owner who's also a demon. I also have to give him something else. Okay, well, what if we let the demon, probe into kids' minds to find out their biggest fears? And then they put those fears in the race. Then there's the rival kid who is fantastic at BMX racing and always makes fun of Aaron. And that takes me back to the beginning of the story, because in the beginning of the story, they were not friends. They get to the race and it's like, well, I guess we have to survive. So I guess we're going to have to work together, because we are in a dangerous spot. Now, granted, it's for kids, so you can't be excessively violent or anything, but you can still be scary because kids like to be scared. I won't give away the ending. I hope people read the story. But
all of the children are claimed by the demons and lost forever.
Well, you said it was the deadliest race, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was like, the proof is in the title. There it is right there.
Yeah. I tried to warn you. It sounds like we're hearing, Shawn, one major component to the outline is earning the character change. How is that character going to change? And how are you going to track that change throughout the outline? That's one major component. Another one is this shopping list that you make. The way you were phrasing them almost sounded like they were questions you wanted to have answered about the story. And then you're figuring out how to connect the dots between those questions in a way. Hey friends, we'd like to take just a moment and invite you to join the Magic Box Brush Club at digitalartbrushes.com. There you can claim your 100% free lifetime membership to the Magic Box Brush Club and get new digital art brushes with accompanying tutorial guides every month for an entire year. Visit digitalartbrushes.com and join the Magic Box Brush Club today. Do you structure the act breaks first and then get the more minor beats?
It varies. It varies on the project. Try to do it in a way that helps you simplify your act structure. So let's say we're doing 4 acts. I can do 8 pages per act. With the Deadliest Race, I knew where the breaks were going to be. Once I started to fill in all those things, that wish list inside the outline, inside those 3 key questions. The end of Act 1 is when Aaron goes to the bike shop and he signs that contract to go be in the race. Act 2, we get sucked into the race. Act 3, now we're in the race. And then Act 4, conclusion. There are some books where it's just like, I only have X amount of pages. And they'll tell you, like, you only have so many words per book.
Right.
So you got to work this out.
Yeah. So it's more prescribed in that instance.
Right.
So just to clarify, when you're outlining a comic or a graphic novel, you kind of work on both at the same time. You kind of have a vague sense of the act breaks, but then you're working out the individual story beats in between the act breaks. And if you need to shift one of those act breaks, you evaluate that in the kind of bird's eye view picture of the story. You're going, well, if it's a story about the deadliest BMX race, well, then we need to have a lot of room for cool stuff happening during these supernatural races.
Exactly. So, yeah. So like from that there, I know that's going to be the meat of the book. That's going to require the most amount of pages of the story.
Yeah. So you allocate accordingly.
Yes. You have to allocate accordingly. Yes.
Yeah. It's not necessarily a linear process.
No.
You might actually be progressing through your writing process and then jump back to outlining. Or as you illustrated with the story from Fast Break, you might even jump all the way back to the big why of the story as you're progressing through the outline. So it's very fluid in that way.
Oh, yeah. I'm not all over the place all the time, but like that outline, the outline and wish list are always key for me.
Wish list, that's a great word for it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I was saying shopping list, but wish list is so much better.
What's your process like taking that outline and transitioning it to that first draft?
If I know for a fact this is exactly how the first act is going to go, and I know all the things in between the lines, let's go to that first. There have been some times where I know what the final act looks like thoroughly. And I'm like, well, we'll start at the end. And I'm like, well, now that I think about it, now that I've written the final act this way, this actually came out really well. I should change up some of the characters and story development in chapter 2, because that's going to fit act 4 better. I'm not saying that it's rare for me to write a story, act 1, act 2, act 3, or, however many acts in sequential order, because I have sometimes. But for stories like Fast Break, a lot of times I'm writing that out of order. It allows me to take more chances.
That's really interesting. And now that I think about it, it's almost like with painters where you work the whole painting. You don't fixate on the one tiny little detail, like, the character or the tree or, what have you.
Oh, yeah.
Is there something you're looking at or just kind of going by feel? Or is there something in particular you're looking at in your outline where you're like, this seems like a good starting point for my draft?
Going by feel. If I know what these characters look like, sound like in my head, and if a certain act where they're featured fully, that's where I'm going first. And I can build around that.
Can we talk about communicating with the artist?
Yeah, we can talk about that, yes.
When I was struggling with the script for my first comic, in earnest, that is, you were so kind as to send me your script for your Power Rangers comic as an example, something that I could reference in order to understand your process. I was hoping that, it would help me get unstuck, and it did. And something that was so amazing about your script, apart from the fact that it's a really cool Power Rangers story, so you did your job there. That was awesome. I was also amazed when, as a visual artist, reading through the script, I knew exactly what to do. And I did not draw the Power Rangers story. I want to be clear about that. But if I had been the artist, I would have been crystal clear on what my job is on each individual page. Now, for the listeners, I want to unpack that just a little bit more. You describe each page, obviously, of the comic, each panel that is going to be on that page. And then under each panel heading, you have the various assets that need to be designed or accommodated in each panel. So maybe a panel has a big sound effect. That's in the script. How do you do that? How do you envision the comic so clearly when you're writing what to anybody would just look like a normal Word document?
A lot of that just comes from reading comics for almost 40-something years. The thing is, in the beginning, when I used to write comics, I'm like, oh, yeah, we just put 10 panels on this page. And the artist is like, whoa, 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 whoa. These 10 panels, you can do this in 4. And let me show you how. And that's how I really started to learn. And so if I'm collaborating with an artist, I want to make their job as simple as possible. So they have the confidence and wherewithal to just go through and do what they have to do. Even the most complicated things, I make sure that they're put in a way where the artist can visualize, because that's the whole key. If the artist can't visualize what you're writing down, what's the point? My whole thing is that when I write a script, I know what it looks like in my head, but what the artist delivers is still 1,000 times better than what was in my head.
So it was reading lots of comics your whole life. That was part of it. But then another part of it was the back and forth over the years and really listening to the artist.
Yes. A lot of writers struggle listening to artists. You'll see this struggle when you see New York Times bestseller authors go write comics and they don't understand the structure of comics. And so you'll have word balloons with 55 words in them.
Right.
And I'm like, this don't work. We have to keep it concise and simple. I'm not saying that you can't have speeches, but you have to understand not every word balloon can be the Magna Carta. Okay.
That's great.
And it's the same with the historical graphic novels that I do for Capstone. I've written 3 of those. I did a graphic novel about Doris, aka Dory Miller. He was one of the heroes of Pearl Harbor. He had to hand up ammunition so they could load the cannon. Boom. Okay. I'm like, I'm sure he doesn't know what that ammunition area is going to look like, what that little bay underneath the cannon's going to look like. I have to put an image in there. It's okay to give artists reference because you don't know what they know.
Yeah.
And so that's key too. But yeah, when you work with editors will tell you what you can and can't do. It's fine. No problem. But I want to make sure that we're still telling a great story and I get the best from the artist.
Something I thought was so interesting about your Power Rangers script was a little thumbnail that you did of a panel layout. I suppose that panel layout would be kind of difficult to describe, and so why not put a little thumbnail in there? But it was kind of a page that was showing one of the transformations. This transformation was very dynamic, kind of multi-layered in a Power Ranger-y kind of way. Tell me about that. Tell me about the thumbnail you put into your Power Ranger script.
Sometimes I will do like little tiny panel layouts. I don't like telling the artist, well, you should lay out the page this way. But there are some times where I need the story to flow just like this. You can have all the creative freedom that you want, but on this page here, this is what I need. It doesn't mean that I think less of the artist. It's just that like there is a vision in that moment that has to go that way.
Well, in a collaboration that is creative and at various points spontaneous, it wouldn't make sense for that boundary between what is the script and what is the art to be rigid, to be the exact same every time.
Correct.
Of course, it's going to wiggle a little bit because it is a collaboration. And sometimes one creative in the collaboration is kind of leading the creative momentum, and then sometimes it's the other person. So, yeah, it would make sense that sometimes you're putting thumbnails into the script. What are some of the other things that are structural? And I'm assuming when you say structural there, you mean visual structure, the actual visual kind of function of comics.
Try to do no more than 4 to 6 panels a page. There are some writers that can put a ton of panels on a page.
Frank Miller,
like, when Tom King and Mitch Gerrits, when they do books together, you will get like a 9 to 12 panel page. But they've known each other for so long, they understand the rhythm. So it's not a problem. Not every artist can do that. And not every writer can do that too. A lot of authors that don't write comics struggle with how much description in each panel. Sometimes they'll put like 3 panels worth of action in one panel. That doesn't work. And then the artist is going to struggle. And then your overall finished piece isn't what either of you were looking for. Panel layout, the number of panels per page, and dialogue. If they don't have those down, it's going to be a struggle.
Read a lot of comics, folks. Read a lot of Shawn Pryor scripts is what you need to do. Can you think of a time where you knew a script wasn't finished, but you didn't know what would make it finished? And then you had to figure that out.
I did a graphic novel for Capstone, Nat Turner's Rebellion, and I didn't really know how to end that. The thing is, Nat Turner does get caught, and it's like, well, we can't just end it right here. So like I struggled. I turned it in, and they were like, we understand what you did. The script is good, but you have to, put something at the end of it. And this is when the editor comes in and says, well, you can say that, the Nat Turner's Rebellion helped initiate the push for abolition of slavery at the end.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's a great idea. Okay, now how do I put that on the page? We have to do this artistically. So I'm like, okay, so we have to put together, maybe some politicians talking or abolitionists speaking up on the behalf of those who are enslaved. This book is also for kids. And so I did struggle in the beginning. Like I legitimately did struggle with how do we portray this violence? And how do we make this work? And how do we make this come across in a way that's like, listen, they're fighting for their freedom.
Yeah.
And so it probably took me like 2 drafts before like I really felt comfortable in finding that balance between making sure that this is for kids while also saying this is also, for the most part, historically accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, that graphic novel. It's amazing. And all of those challenges you just described are apparent in the source material and in the challenge of trying to translate that into a comic. Yeah, it's really something else.
Shawn, what is some of the best advice you've ever received?
Some of the best advice I've ever received is don't give up on yourself. Allow yourself to fail. And for me, it was making that change from the comic book market to the book market. And that opened up so many doors for me. And if I didn't try, we may not be talking today. And sometimes, it's scary to put yourself out there. Not everybody is the kindest person in the world. Some people are just mean for the sake of being mean. The internet doesn't help that. But it doesn't mean that you should give up on your goals and your dreams. Tell that story.
What is the worst advice you've ever received?
The worst advice I ever received is There's no reason for me to write graphic novels and comics because my stories aren't worth telling.
Oh my.
Oof.
Comic book convention in Pittsburgh, I want to say 2008, 2009. A guy that like signs comic book artists, gets them pro work and whatnot. And I wanted to introduce myself to them. Maybe I could show him some of the books I've made and like he can give me like pointers and whatnot. It's early work. So I understand that like, it may not be the best, but like he was so demeaning. Basically, his advice was, I don't see anything here that's worthwhile. Why are you doing this? Instead of being like, hey, look at your layout here. Does all this stuff line up properly? What is the story that you're actually trying to tell? What is the goal of this? There's some people that just get such a high off of breaking people down instead of building up.
Who is your favorite Muppet and why?
My favorite Muppet. Oh, okay. It's either Rolf or Swedish Chef.
Okay.
Rolf is like the most down to earth, being on that show. And when he plays on the piano, the way the puppets, the way that they do the puppetry, I always enjoyed that.
Our podcast art features a white elephant holding a pink feather. And this is, of course, a reference to Walt Disney's Dumbo, who believed that he needs a magic feather to fly. And throughout the span of the story, by the end, he learns that no, he didn't need that at all, and he could fly all along. What for you is the magic feather that you thought you needed to fly, but figured out later on that you did not?
I, for the longest time, held on to, if I didn't make it in the comic book industry, then everything meant I was a failure. Comics was the way that was going to break in. Comics was the way that was going to advance me to all these other things, when in reality, that wasn't true at all. But I kept pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and just ended up getting more and more hurt. And I just said, you know what? Yeah, let's go this way instead. And now, like I said, I do all kinds of stuff now. Yeah, that I wish I would have let that feather go a long time ago.
We're your hosts, Chris Oatley
And Veronica Kosofsky. Our production coordinator is Mari Gonzalez Curia.
and this show is made possible by the Magic Box Academy.
Subscribe to this podcast on any of the major platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, YouTube.
And join our email list at magicboxacademy.com for notifications about future episodes, courses, and mentorship opportunities.
Get new digital art brushes with accompanying tutorial guides every month for an entire year with your free membership to the Magic Box Academy Brush Club. Join today at digitalartbrushes.com.
And until next time, friends, remember, you're a better artist than you think.